So how are things going over on your side of the state?
Oh, they're going pretty well.
Your health issues been
It's
resolved?
progressing well. It's progressing well.
Well, that's some good news. Seems like a few months back you weren't in very good shape.
Well, I had a serious problem, but my health was in good shape aside from what was causing the problem, and the bypass repaired that. And things are looking optimistic at this point. I have a follow-up appointment with the cardiologist next week, Wednesday, and be interesting to see what he says. Kind of have an idea, but they ran a procedure a couple of weeks ago and verified that when they were doing the bypass, they put a clip around a pouch on the atrium of the heart that collects blood if when atrial fib is going on. And I have atrial fib, and the clip is well placed and by all intents and purposes will prevent coagulation from escaping from that sac, so we don't have to worry about stroke from coagulated blood in the bloodstream. So that's all really good.
It sounds good. Let's see. There are Dick Galant, Frank Marfia, and Al Wahmhoff signing in.
Hi, Paul. Good to see you.
You're probably going to have to repeat everything.
So often. I hope you're doing well, Paul.
It's looking real good at this point.
That's good to hear. Hi, Al. Stick along.
Hi. Hey, Dick.
Hi, Al.
And Bill. Hi there.
Hello. Says Frank Marfia connecting to audio. That's a much better picture of you, Al. With some light around you.
Yeah. There's Frank.
Yeah.
Hi,
Good
Frank.
evening, Frank.
Hey, guys.
I think it's going to be interesting to see. I've heard from a few people who aren't able to make it because of some other things that have come up. Pete Garthy had a death in the family. Jim Blanchard is out of the country, I think. He's somewhere, I think, in Europe. So I see something flashing at the top. Is that just me, or is that everybody see
That's
that?
like the picture refracting on you or going back at you at the top, because I see Frank and Al.
Oh,
No,
okay, there you are.
There he is. Technical difficulties.
Yeah.
Michael Murphy.
all the way from Williamston. There he is.
Getting some valuable technical assistance.
Yeah, he always has to do that. His wife has to get him straightened out. We ought to get a dental picture of it because we get to see always the upper half of his mouth. There we go.
Hey, Dick, how are you?
Good.
Hey, Mike.
Thank you. Hi, Mike.
Yeah.
Frank, your picture looks like you're shooting in black and white.
I don't know why. Let's see. It's
No, the picture behind you shows some color. There's a battleship or something behind you. There's
well, that picture is of my uncle for whom I'm named. We found his medals, World War II medals. He died.
really.
He was a pilot, an Air Force pilot,
Whoa.
and he died on his 8th or 9th mission in 42, I think. He might have been one of the casualties of a bombing raid that his plane was seen crashing into the North Sea, and there were no survivors. Nobody parachuted out of it. The other planes that were flying nearby assumed everybody on the plane was dead.
You know, Tom and Carl Ockepenny's father was in the Normandy invasion. And you know the scene in the D-Day where the guy's parachute got caught in the steeple?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, his dad actually saw that guy.
Hmm.
And then apparently he was injured, he being Mr. Ockepenny, and he, and a German medic helped him when all that happened. That's just wild. But I'm sorry for your case, Frank.
Well, we have letters from my uncle. Apparently they were telling the flyers that if they're shot down, they're treated well by the Germans. Of course, we know that's probably not true. But I guess maybe they were trying to make them feel a little easier, the pilots. In the early days of the war, there was very little support. There was very little small plane support. So these bombers were on their own. If 12, 15 of them went out, maybe only 7 or 8 would make it back. So it was a pretty deadly, the first year was pretty,
You said 42, so that's pretty kind of
43. I'm not sure exactly the year.
still.
Yeah, it was very early in the war. He had joined the Air Force, the Army Air Corps, I guess it was called, in 39 before we got in the war. Anyway, that's my namesake, I guess. I was named for him.
Was he from West Michigan?
Yeah, he was from Fenville. In fact, there was a story. I have to find this in the local paper. One of his practice runs, he was flying out of Texas, but they flew all over the U.S. He dive bombed the plane over Fenville, and they dropped parachutes of candy.
Oh, wow.
into the streets of Fenville, and again, this could have been a story that my parents or my aunts and uncles made up, but it could have been true. I mean, their practice runs were 800 miles in any directions in the U.S. So from North Texas to Southern Michigan, it might have been 1,000 miles.
Wow.
Do you know how old he was at that time?
He was 22.
Oh,
He's
okay.
really young. He joined when he was only 18. Yeah, he was quite
They
young.
did that. You're right on the lake. So if they had the beach, they'd be, if they had to ditch the airplane, they had a place to go.
Well, there was no parent. There were other planes coming back.
I hear you. No, I'm talking about if they did that stunt in Fenville,
Yeah,
that the Lake Michigan was close. So the point is that they had a place to ditch the airplane if something happened, and maybe that's one reason they did that.
I'm sure what he did was probably not legal according to the Air Force. But anyway, I don't know if any of his. I mean, he was only a first
the
lieutenant.
pilot?
Yes, he was
Whoa.
only a first lieutenant, but he was already the senior person on the plane.
Holy smokes.
I mean, they were so desperate for pilots
Right.
early in the war. They sent the planes to Europe through South America. Apparently, there's a passage from I don't know, Brazil, Guyana to Portugal that's a little bit shorter than if you went straight across the Atlantic,
I don't know that.
wider part of the Atlantic. And then the planes went up toward Britain. So the planes were delivered by pilots to Great Britain, but they did a roundabout way of getting them there. They weren't delivered on ships.
Well, my understanding is as things progressed, there were WACs handled
Yes, that's right.
plane transports.
You're right. You're absolutely right. I just read that recently in the last 6 months that some women pilots flew some of these planes to Europe. They weren't in combat, but they were delivering them.
You know, something interesting involves Grand Rapids and the war and that, but there was, I don't know if you remember or heard of a company called Lear Sigler,
Mhm.
which is by Grand Rapids Junior College, or was originally. Anyways, they brought in and trained pilots. So maybe your uncle trained there. Maybe that was one reason that drew him. But the reason is that they developed instruments, like for the bomb site instruments, but also weather instruments. And they would bring the pilots into Grand Rapids to learn how to, read weather instruments, which you need for either bombing or just obviously flying an airplane. And so, anyways, I don't know if you're aware, but like, we morph now into current times. That same group is the what's her name? Betsy DeVos is the prince. That's the family that owns Lear Sigler.
Yeah.
And if you think on your car in the rear, the rear view mirror, it has a little a hole where there's a chip. It's usually green. It just looks like a BB hole or something. Well, they designed that and sold it to General Motors or wherever has that part. So they maintain that, instrumentation specialty. And my dad's sister married, it happened, a serviceman came there to train. He was from Long Island, New York, or Brooklyn. And his brother, this happened a few years back, or now, but his brother, which my uncle and my aunt, they went back to New York after the war eventually and grew up there, was the governor of New York at one time, Governor Carey, Hugh Carey.
Well, my grandparents didn't learn of his death until I think he might have died. Actually, it was 43 he died, but he didn't. They weren't officially told that he had died until 46, till the war was over.
3 years later?
Yeah, he was listed as missing in action.
Wow. How did
That's
they
why
find out?
his letters must have given them some hope. Yeah, we have copies of my uncle's letters that said, if you don't hear from me, if my plane is shot down, very likely I'm alive in a prisoner of war camp where we've been told the American U.S. pilots are treated decently. Anyway, so they weren't officially notified of his death until 46.
John Beeline, the coach of Michigan, he retired a couple of years ago, the basketball coach. The Saving Private Ryan actually is about his family. And that it's, the storyline, and somehow Steven Spielberg got a hold of it. And he indicated that they are, well, I don't know if they followed through. This is about a year ago that Spielberg was thinking of doing a documentary on his family, because they, the storyline and everything that he got from Private Ryan, it was kind of Hollywooded, I guess, but there was there were like three brothers, and one of them did not fight in D-Day. He fought somewhere else, and he got captured by the Germans, but they couldn't, like Frank's talking about, apparently they couldn't trace him.
Yeah.
But his aunt kept saying that he was alive, and eventually, he came back somehow. I don't know. But the whole story is, he's got quite a large family, like 7 or 8 in the family, and he's from Buffalo, New York, or somewhere in that area. And it's kind of an interesting story.
Well, Allegan County had a German prisoner of war camp, 44 and 45. And they were I don't know how many prisoners were there in that camp, but it was in the Allegan County forest between Allegan and Fenville. And we have pictures of it. We have the story of this camp. The soldiers, the captured soldiers, I don't know how they got delivered to Michigan, but they were forced to work in the local factory in Fenville. There's a fruit factory in Fenville. And my grandmother, Musha, as we called her, that's the Polish word for grandmother, was
You're
working.
Italian, aren't you, or Spanish?
I'm half Polish. No, I'm
Okay.
half Italian.
Okay, well, I'll give you that. Sorry.
So my grandmother was upset because she had to serve them coffee during their coffee break. She had left Poland in the 20s or teens, but still she had family back in Poland that they were hearing horrendous stories.
Well, one thing I learned when I was in Hawaii on the Big Island. Now, keep in mind, not too long ago they had the volcano, right? Mauna Loa. And apparently they had German prisoners of war there. And that what they did there is they built from the rocks and shale along the roads, they built these like fences or rock fences to make sure that the lava wouldn't flow over the road. So that was their job, and they're, in a sense, they were pretty isolated. I actually was there, and as far as you could see, it was just lava. So it's like there's a mountain, and then there's like miles of parking lots in a sense, but it's lava. It's kind of lava.
It hardens.
And I saw an actual happening of lava. We went to we were on a road, and there was this tree, and we were about, maybe a block away from the ocean. It was kind of a prairie area. And we went back the next day, and in the meantime, the lava had flowed over the road we were at. And it was about 12 inches. So there's no way that you could have passed through it. And it was still warm enough that if you wanted to light a cigarette, because it cracked, you could light it. But the most fantastical thing that I saw is that I told you we were about, I don't know, I'm guessing, but maybe a block or less from the ocean. And it was like on a precipice. So the lava was flowing into the ocean, and it created these huge billows of smoke that went up. It was just unbelievable. If you wanted to get a sense of creation and how something was created, it was awesome. The force of nature and what it can do. It was unbelievable.
Well, if I ever get to England, apparently in Cambridge University, there is a wall of honor for all of the American, maybe other servicemen too, mostly pilots and persons on planes who died in the war. They're honored on some big display. And I've been told that my uncle's name is on there. So it'd be a nice thing for me to get to England and get up north to Cambridge.
Is his name Franklin Marfia too?
It's just Frank.
Frank Marfia?
Yeah, Frank Marfia.
Well, how come you became Franklin?
FDR. My father was a big fan.
Oh, I got you. You got 2 for 1 then.
Yeah, 2 for 1. He was a big fan of FDR. If the interesting thing about our story today, I have often wondered why the FDR has so much hard time. Yeah, I've seen movies where the one with Winston Churchill, I can't think of the name of it now. There was a popular movie in the last 3 years. It was won an Academy Award, I think, for the actor who played Winston Churchill. And he was talking to Franklin Roosevelt about getting help, getting planes, getting ships sent to England. And FDR was telling him, I can't get it through Congress. I can't deliver this equipment. I wanted to give it to you, but I can't. We have to do it roundabout ways. We have to, because apparently Roosevelt, Churchill said, well, can you just bring it to the border of Canada? Can you bring the planes to like a half a block from the Canadian border, and then we'll send our people over to pull the planes across the border, and then they can fly them to England. So I mean, there was, and I see now from the topic that we're supposed to be talking today, there was a huge anti-war movement, America First movement in the U.S.
Mhm.
Huge, and the Nazis supported it.
Of course.
They were trying to keep us out of the war.
Right.
Well, sure.
Hey, Frank, I wondered if do you think that it's on a wall in Cambridge,
Yeah,
correct?
that's what I've been told.
Is there could you write to the university?
I
or the
could
museum?
try. I could try to get a picture of it or some kind of a visual of it. Right. It might just be his name on a wall.
Yeah,
But
but
it's not his photo or anything.
I don't know if any of you have been in Washington, D.C. to the one in Vietnam.
Yeah, I've been.
I saw they have all the names on there that are recorded, and I know it was so moving when I saw somebody that I played Little League baseball. It just shocked me. There's few moments of my life that was so powerful to be in that site and understand what those people went through.
I guess if you've ever seen the movie Memphis Belle, I've been told that that's a very realistic version of what happened early in the war to the U.S. pilots. I mean, there's scenes in there where the planes are shot out of the air and bodies are falling through the sky. Members of the U.S. Army Air Corps. I mean, that's supposed to be a very realistic movie. It's a very hard movie to watch for me.
Well, one a little different, but in Ypsilanti they have the Yankee Air Force. It's called, and they built the B. I don't know what your uncle flew, but they had a B-25 factory there.
I think it was a B-25 or B-17.
They would bring those in. Well, I saw a replica of the B-29 that was flown by Tibbet, and I actually saw Tibbet when I took my son once to see it because they'd have an air show. Yeah.
So this
That's
is
like the
photo of
Memphis
my
Belle.
uncle in front of his plane with his
He had a Purple Heart.
Purple Heart and some other award. A Purple Heart and I can't.
I don't know what that other one. I can't see the one underneath it.
Yeah.
Lower one. I don't know what that is. Wow.
B-24 Liberator bomber
Yeah, that's right. Well, they built them in Ypsilanti.
was lost on a bombardment mission to Bremen, Germany on November 13th, 1943. His damaged aircraft crashed into the North Sea in weather which precluded rescue due to the distance from the coast. So My sister did a nice job of
Yeah,
framing this and putting his medals up, and
yeah, that's beautiful.
so I have it hung
Which
up.
one is he?
He is a good-looking guy right here with a little kind of a.
Up a little bit, please.
He's the right in the middle at the front row, with kind of a not a coonskin cap, but
Yeah.
it's like a Boy Scout
Wow.
cap.
Wow.
So he was very good looking. He was very athletic. I'm not so good looking. I'm not that athletic. But anyway, that's the story of how I got my name.
Wow.
You know, one of the things that strikes me about World War II is how young these men were. I mean, we're raised on the John Wayne model of guys in their 40s and 50s, and when you realize that how really young some of these guys were, it's just incredible. A couple of years ago, when I was working for an organization that had an annual luncheon honoring older workers for their achievements, we gave one of the highest awards to a guy who served in World War II as in the Army Air Corps, and he grew up on just a small farm, like in Virginia or somewhere along those lines. And one of the remarkable things was he managed, because everybody in town where he grew up knew everybody, he managed to convince the local draft board that he was old enough to enroll. And when you talk about how desperate things were in the early years, somehow the draft board sort of agreed that, well, he might have been 17, but we'll call him 18. And he went into town. He said, riding on the back of his father's wagon. And they managed to sign him up, and by the time they processed all the paperwork, he had actually turned 18. So, and his whole dream had been to join the Army Air Corps. So that's what he ended up doing for the entire war years. So he was like 18.
Yeah, they were young.
Yeah. So when you said your uncle was 22, he was an old man by some of those standards.
I don't know if he was the oldest of this crew, but he was the captain, or he was a first lieutenant, but he was the.
Yeah.
Well, he was, Frank, you said he was, what Bill's talking about, if he went in at 18 or 19, I can't remember what you said, but he had experience, and it was like a battlefield promotion.
Right, there was.
Because the other people a lot of the other ones either armed the bombs or they were on the machine guns. He was the only one that flew, perhaps.
He had 2 years.
Maybe
2
one
years
other
of
guy, but
2 years of training.
yeah,
on planes before the war, before we got into the war.
right. So that's why he had his rank. So
I guess they were desperate for pilots.
I'm sure.
Let me interrupt for a second here. I see it must be Frank Unger.
Right.
His name is down there, but we don't. If you're listening, Frank, we don't see your video. So maybe you need to hit the button or something in there.
Well, he had his audio on, like when he first came on, Bill, and now it's off. There's no audio showing. So I don't know.
A small group tonight.
Let's see if he. Well, why don't we just plunge ahead to the sort of unofficial topic of the evening? And let me start just by turning things over to Franklin Marfia. There it is. Well, we lost Frank Unger again.
I'm texting him.
Oh, okay.
No, go ahead.
Right. And Frank, I became interested in the topic after I read you mentioned the Rachel Maddow blog. I never followed a blog at all, so I started doing that. The more I got into that blog, the more interesting the whole story of Coughlin and the people on the far right became. So let me turn it over to you and as a starting point.
Okay, well, I'm really behind the time, guys. I'm not a tech person, and I just got my first smartphone about a month ago. So that's how far I had a flip phone before that, but now I have a Google 6 Pixel. But so the first blog I downloaded was Rachel Maddow's Ultra, and it's an 8-part story about the far right in the U.S. that supported the Nazis and Hitler, and was opposed to the U.S. Involvement in any part of the war going on in Europe. Very actively supported, and apparently they were paid. Some of the congressmen, a couple of senators, actually got payments from the Germans. They actually got money to oppose the war. Some of the documents came out when the war was over, and the U.S. attorney went to Germany to get some of the records, and he saw all kinds of proof that these congressmen were in the pay of the Germans. I don't know how many congressmen. There might have been as many as 10 or 12, 15, but there were at least 3 senators.
The number that I saw was 24.
24?
Something like that.
And
From all over the country, or they were concentrated?
all over the country.
Okay.
And there were at least 3 senators. One of them who was very close to Harry Truman. So when the prosecuting attorney, they lost their case against a far right group in New York City. There was a long court case that the Department of Justice lost. The people were at least in New York anyway. They tended to support the effort to stay out of the war. This happened like in 41 or 42 that they lost this case. Maybe do you remember the year, Bill?
I think the trial was 1940.
40. Okay, so we hadn't gotten into the war yet.
Right.
And it's part of the reluctance, from what I read, it's part of the reluctance of our current DOJ to try to use sedition, the sedition law, what happened in January 6th, because they were embarrassed. The loss was complete. The men were exonerated, even though they had guns and they had plans to shoot up armories and in support of the or opposed to our involvement in the war. So it was a big blow to the Department of Justice that we lost this case. This priest from Detroit. Do any of you have ever heard of him, Charles Coughlin?
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I had never heard of him until I listened to this blog. I never knew the what was he called? The
radio priest.
Radio priest. He had a following of 130 million people listened to his radio program.
Yeah, he was very popular.
Very popular. Is very anti-Semitic. Very much opposed to our getting involved in the war. The U.S. involvement in World War II. Charles Coughlin. And
he was a pastor of the Church of the Little Flower in
Shrine of the Little Flower. Yeah.
Is that a local church? I mean, is that like a monument or something?
It's been designated as a basilica.
But it's a parish, right? It's a Detroit
Right.
area parish.
Right.
And was he the main priest of that parish?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
So he had this very popular radio show, which ran from the 33 to, for some reason, I still haven't figured out why it was canceled. Our government canceled it in 39.
But the the government put pressure on the broadcaster,
Ah,
and the broadcaster ended up canceling his radio show because of public pressure that was put on the broadcaster. So,
but the Bishop of Detroit, and who later became a cardinal, right? Cardinal.
Cardinal Mooney?
well, this is where what I found out.
You found out more than I did.
The Bishop of Detroit at the time was Michael Gallagher,
Oh, okay.
and he's the one that it never dawned on me that he was the same Michael Gallagher who was the Bishop of Grand Rapids at one point.
Very pretty hotel room.
And so after reading up or seeing his name in all of these stories and how he was a supporter, sponsor, and protector of Coughlin, I decided I wanted to find out more about him. And that's when I saw
When I came
that
in today, I was cray
he had been ordained in, I think, 1893 or something like that, and served as a priest in the Diocese of Grand Rapids until he was appointed to become a Bishop of Grand Rapids, I think in 1915 or something like that. And then he served as Bishop of Grand Rapids for a year or two before being sent down to take over the Detroit diocese. So that was who his the Bishop of Detroit was at the time, and his connection to Grand Rapids. But then after I published that notice about that, it was, I'm losing my mind, Jim, what the hell? Anyway, he pointed out that actually while he was serving as a priest in Grand Rapids, he was also on the faculty of the seminary. And that's where that picture that I put out in the last couple of days comes from. We think it's like 1909, and from what I saw in Nord Bufka's book, and Father Gallagher at that time served on the faculty of the seminary from 1909 to 1911 or something like that, just a brief window there. But that's this is the first time that the whole Father Coughlin story sort of hit right at home, right in our backyard. Never realized that. So anyway, that was the what I was able to find out about. I call it the Grand Rapids connection.
Well, Bishop Gallagher never reined him in, did he?
No, he continued to support him right up until the bishop's death in the
early 40s.
No, it was 37 or somewhere around in there. And that's when, at that time, Bishop Mooney, who became Cardinal Mooney, was appointed to be the Bishop of Detroit, came in, and he tried to rein him in, but it wasn't the church officially that reined him in. It was the pressure of the broadcast put on the broadcasting companies that actually canceled Coughlin's radio program. But it wasn't until 2 years later, 1942, that Cardinal Mooney shut down. He told Coughlin to shut down his newsletter or newspaper that was called Social Action or something like that. And with the sort of read between the lines admonition that if he didn't, he would be defrocked. And so it took 5 more years from the time that Mooney took over until Coughlin actually was silenced. So there's all sorts of interesting history that needs to be explored a little bit more in there.
But I never really heard an explanation of why he was so anti-Semitic, except that there was a theory going around then that the Jews killed Jesus, and so the Catholics had the right to be anti-Semitic because.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Frank.
Yeah. Because,
Okay, good. It took me a while. Thank you.
So the church was really anti-Semitic for quite a while.
Right. And that,
Overtly anti-Semitic.
yeah, Charles Gallagher was a Jesuit. The book that he wrote a couple of years ago called The Nazis of Copley Square. Copley Square is a section of Boston where a lot of the people involved with the social action or the Christian Front resided. And but anyway, I have to remind myself, I don't really know the theological history of how this. You talk about the theology that said that the Jews killed God. Deicide was the
Deicide, right?
Was the term that was used. Now, Father Gallagher's book goes into quite a bit of detail about the theological underpinnings of how his people like Coughlin and others in the movement were able to justify anti-Semitism, and it came down to two things in church history. One of them that was in existence until 1965, the mystical body of Christ,
Right.
that was finally removed from church theology in 1965 during the Second Vatican Council. But part of that was the belief that the Jews had were responsible for killing Christ, and so that therefore they could rationalize their anti-Semitic activities. Now, I'm not sure if I got all of that straight in there.
I muted myself.
And Father Gallagher's book really is part of it deals with this whole religious underpinnings of how these people were able to sort of manipulate their own thinking, that it was, to justify the anti-Semitism that existed in the church for hundreds of years, and sort of came to a head in the 1920s and 30s, right up through the start of the war in, the end of 1941. So that was what I found interesting in doing some of the research and into the writings of trying to figure out what was actually happening. Why would people who proclaimed to be Christians be so anti-Semitic?
I think it's going to be the bunny, because the bunny really
And I don't know, is that Frank Marfia, is that what you were thinking? Or
Well, I read something too that said that Father Coughlin, Coughlin, is that how you pronounce it?
Coughlin.
Coughlin. He blamed the Jews for Kristallnacht. I mean, the Germans destroyed all kinds of businesses and killed Jews left and right in mostly Germany during this attack in, was it 37, 38? And Coughlin said that was the Jews' fault, that they suffered the Kristallnacht experience.
Can I ask you a question or a couple of questions, Frank?
Sure.
And Bill, maybe I don't have a lot of knowledge on, and I appreciate what you're saying. Can I ask if Henry Henry Ford
Mhm.
was pro kind of I don't know, was a socialist, I think, or something like that. As an example, if you talk to people even today around Ypsilanti and that, they'll always call it Fords. You'll pronounce it that way, or and the reason is that if you are going on to I-94, if you're familiar with that, and you go into Detroit, there are various plants that are, I'm leading up to something, but just bear with me, that were set up to the main Ford headquarters. In other words, they made parts and everything, and that what's his name? Ford had an idea of the plantation. That's why he wanted people to see him as the plantation father. That's why they called him Fords. And I think in the 1939 or something that the Nazis went to the River Rouge plant because that was the largest production plant in the world. I don't know if you're familiar with that. And anyways, if Henry Ford was kind of in that ilk, that there, and Royal Oak isn't that far from Dearborn. If there was some kind of a connection there, I don't know. The other question I have is that where did, if Coughlin ever got money, you're talking about these senators and that, but if he ever got money with the, did Ford or somebody back him on these radio shows or something? If everybody ever probed that.
According to the Rachel Maddow blog, the very end, the last edition, the last version, the 8th episode, they found a big chunk of money when he died in some offshore account. They
don't know how he got it, right?
They don't know for sure, but the probability was that it came from the Germans, from the Nazis.
Somebody.
They're not sure. They're not sure. But they found a big chunk of money, hundreds of thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars in his account.
Even millions, didn't it?
Yeah, maybe.
Really? Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Part of
I don't know how much
the,
money. Actually, I don't know how much money. I don't want to put a figure on it, but a bunch of money was found in his name at his death. Now, I don't know where the money went to, and I don't know if he after he was squashed in the mid 40s or late 40s, he continued serving as a priest at that parish, right, Bill?
Mhm. Yes.
correct. Right. I don't believe he was the pastor any longer. I'd have to double check on
Right.
that. But
I think he died in the 80s, sometime
Yeah,
at some point in the
right.
80s.
Now, the two books that I read, Frank, you mentioned the investigator. I forget what his name is. He was appointed by the Attorney General.
Baggy or something, or
Right. To
I wrote his
and
name.
he was told that he would have free reign over investigating all of the financial and who in the heck was involved in supporting the Nazis and the far right, and that the report would be published once he got it all done. Well, he got it all done, and it listed among the highlights of the listings was these number of members of the House of Representatives and a couple of senators who got paid by the Nazi
Government.
spy network that was flourishing especially in Massachusetts, and they would use all of sorts of mechanisms to get the money down into the. They don't mention exactly if that's where Coughlin got his money from. Just a footnote on that. I suspect that he got a lot of it just because he had at one point, I think it was like 30 million listeners.
Yeah.
At that time, the population of 19
Late 30s.
it was only like 130 or 103 million or something like that. So he had a third of the population of this country listening to him. I think that's where a lot of his money probably came from. But the network operating behind the scenes, and this is where, well, let me finish up with when this special attorney was appointed and he turned in his report, the then Attorney General, who later became a justice on the Supreme Court, said he couldn't publish it and that he had to show it over to the White House to get their approval. And that's where Harry Truman entered the picture. Because Truman had been in the House and the Senate for a long, long time and knew a lot of these people who had lent their offices for use primarily through the use of the franking privilege. That's where senators and members of the House don't have to pay for postage.
Right.
And so all these guys would send out these letters and treatises free to the general public just by allowing these guys, some of whom were actual spies, to come in and operate out of their offices. And so Truman said, yeah, this is not going to be published. Well, it took another 15 years or so before that attorney actually published the report on his own. And that's what I read as one of the books. It gets really, it names names, but you've got to think like a lawyer and a prosecutor trying to put together the trail of money and follow the money. It was really, if you were an accountant and if you were an attorney, you might be able to really, I found that really kind of dry. It wasn't all that particularly, except for the fact that it did name names. And the same thing with Charles Gallagher, that's the guy who wrote Nazis of Copley Square. He got into especially those Nazi sympathizers who were in, the Christian front had really moved from New York up to Boston,
Yeah.
and operated out of Boston for a long time. And one of the biggest German spy masters operate out of Boston as well at that time. It was just so successful in getting people who didn't realize that they were actually operating as part of the espionage network to do a lot of the dirty work or the information that came out in the front. So anyway, that was the other document that I read in there that was really kind of interesting. Like I said, it's dry, but it does name names, and you can see why the government didn't want, and I say the government being just about everybody in Congress, including the White House, didn't want that information made public.
Is that the reason, just you said Christian group, was that kind of generic Christian?
Well,
Mostly Catholic, wasn't it?
It was mostly Catholic.
It was, okay, because there's the Christian Science Monitor, and this might be way out, is stationed in Boston. And I'm just wondering if that came out of all that, that's all. And the other question I have is that if Coughlin is doing all this and he's on a radio program, was there somebody ever named as a kind of a Confederate or ally or helper to him that would, someone's got to be managing up, it would seem, all this money and stuff that's going back. I mean, the guy's doing a one-man show. How can you run a parish?
Yeah. Um, Go ahead. Oh,
The story says that some of his dispersal, some of his the stuff he published was written for him by this spy. The spy would actually write the speech, and then he would just say it
He was
verbatim.
a front man. He was Tucker Carlson type.
Yeah.
Okay. Jeez.
So I mean that there's
Yeah, that's the sad part.
there's a little bit of history here that reflected or that mimicked a little bit what happened in our country with Russia. That they tried to influence the election and probably did, but we don't. Maybe we'll never know for sure.
Well, getting back to the theology
Oh yeah, the theology. That's
of this whole thing, one of the rationales that was raised by the far right Catholics, why they were able to support anti-Semitism, was that they were, it's the old friend of my, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Their primary focus was on the impact of Russia and the Soviet Union at that time. And they felt that the principal supporters of communism, at least in this country, were Jewish. It came from the Jewish community. And so when it came down to, I mean, if you're thinking kind of logically in here, which I would believe not, there weren't a whole lot of logicians. It just kind of fit well with their mindset was it's okay to side with Hitler against the Jews in his country, but rather that than communist government of the Soviet Union. So, I mean, that's part of what was going on in this country at that time. Does that sound?
yeah. And then I had a backstory a little bit. I've often wondered over the years. I remember reading about the story of this. About 1,000 Jews were on this ship that sailed from the Netherlands, and they were not allowed to land in Canada. They were refused admission to the U.S. in a couple ports. They even went to, I think, to South America and were refused to be
they did.
disembarked. And they ultimately went back to the Netherlands. And I think there were not quite 1,000, 900 and some Jews on this ship. And about a quarter of them ended up in concentration camps. And another 3/4 of them got some kind of exit visas to other neutral countries. But some of them did die in concentration camps. And I always wondered, why wouldn't we let them in? I mean, it's only 1,000 Jews, but I see now there was this huge anti-Jewish, anti-Semitism sentiment going on in our country that I guess the FDR administration did not want to upset or. Canada has since apologized to somebody. I don't know who they would apologize to because these people are all deceased, but I don't think the U.S. ever did.
Well, growing up in Grand Rapids and the progressive city that it is, that anti-Semitism, even when I was a little kid, I was aware of it.
I never was.
Pardon me?
News in Fenville. Did we, Albert? Did we have any?
Well, but I mean, in Grand Rapids, the one thing that I remember is that I never really, it's ironic in a way, but encountered, even knew where the synagogue was, right?
Right.
In Grand Rapids. And I mean, that, and even at that time, it's a pretty good sized city. So the irony was that it eventually it was built almost right down the block from my house, because that synagogue still exists today, but it's by Aquinas College off Fulton Street. But that Grand Rapids was not a much of a Jewish town, that I would say. If you come to Ann Arbor or even Detroit, my brother married a Jewish woman, and I've been to Jewish, rites or ceremonies of bar mitzvah and funeral and that. So, but I think about what was talked to us in the seminary about times there. It was like never even mentioned.
I don't recall any book that I read during my seminary days that I just don't recall. It wasn't a topic that came up. Does any do you remember anything to do with anti-Semitism or the Jewish faith? Or I don't.
The only thing I can tell you that I read is after being in the seminary, and I was surprised, is that Saint John Chrysostom. You remember? Have you heard of him? You remember he has the golden mouth and that. And I think he lived like what in, I don't know, 1200 or something like that. But he was cited as some of his sermons were anti-Semitic. And I was reading this, and I kind of went like that. And then I, not too long ago, it came up again somewhere that I saw that to kind of maybe validate the fact that happened, because he's a father of the church or something. I don't know. But I think that sentiment pervaded for a long time. It might have been part of Vatican II to just say, hey, wait a minute, let's clear the decks.
Even the Vatican II, I think the year was 1965 that they issued their document disowning deicide.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't recall, actually, we would have been in fifth year at that time.
Right.
I can't recall that received much attention, but maybe I'm wrong. It didn't. Does anybody have any thoughts along those lines?
Well, I don't remember anything in the classroom or anything that really related to this. I think there was one class we had a comment from one of the faculty that just basically said that the recent pronouncements basically made it clear that it wasn't the Jewish religion or something like that killed Jesus. Okay, but that's as far as it went.
Yeah. Yeah, it wasn't a big part of our education.
No.
My memory.
I sent a note off to this Charles Gallagher, just telling him that we were going to be talking about this tonight. And I pointed out to him that people of our generation, he's probably, Father Gallagher, I think he's about 10 years younger than us. But I pointed out to him that me personally, I was raised in a German church in Muskegon, St. Joseph's, and in those years, in the 50s, well, way back, the parishes were very ethnic.
Yes,
St. Jean's was the French, St. Michael's was the Polish, St. Mary's was the Irish, and St. Joseph's is where the German community generally went. Now, a little footnote in there. We'd always, in our family, we'd always said that we weren't German, we were Swiss. And I always thought, well, that's a kind of a way of getting out of it. But it turns out that one of my cousins did an extensive family tree, and it turns out that indeed we are Swiss. That we,
Really?
if you get into Indiana, there are a lot of people named Yagerlener.
Really?
And we're all related in one way or another to a guy who came over from Switzerland in the, early 1800s or something like that. But at any rate, and then I pointed out to him that I could not recall any references to Jews or anti-Semitism in my education in that parish, although when World War II ended, the pastor of our church, a guy named Albert Stratz, he sponsored a couple of a family of German immigrants to come over to this country in the around early 1950s, and it occurred to me later on that those two boys that enrolled in our elementary school, their parents would have been like in their 40s and maybe 30s in the 1930s and probably into World War II. And I'm looking back at that now in hindsight saying, you know, I'll bet you they were in the German army. It just seems like you couldn't not be in Germany in the 40s and not be connected with the army in some capacity. Now, we do know that a lot of Catholics were persecuted during the Nazi regime, but I'm just in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, well, that may be, but nobody asked, nobody brought up the question in my parish. Now, we do know that some people who became members of the parish changed their names from German into English. The Freitag family, they became the Fridays. And there was another family in there that, again, I'm just guessing that the husband was probably in the German army. I can't recall exactly what their name was, but I do remember that. And then to Father Gallagher, I posed this other part of our upbringing was that the members of the seminary faculty, some of them were in the ministry in the 1930s. We know that people like Monsignor Martin, Shaw, Moran, they were ordained in the 1930s. Zaskowski, Father Zaskowski. But we never heard anything about their experiences in the 1930s. It never came up in discussion. And certainly
my dad
even
went to school with Father Zaskowski. He knew him.
Who did?
My dad did. And he had Monsignor Shaw in high school in religion when he went to Catholic Central.
Oh my gosh. And then even beyond those who were ordained and served in the ministry in the 1930s, just about everybody else, Father Leo, Father McKinney, Father Rose, that whole generation were in their teens, like in the 30s. But we never heard any references at all to what was, anti-Semitism or the Nazi movement in general or the fascist movement. We know that Father Guzikowski was a chaplain in the army, but he never really said anything about his experiences that I can recall. But here's like a big gap in the people who were the generation prior to us that experienced these things in the 30s, but we don't know anything about. We never talked about it. We never heard about it. That was what I posed to Father Gallagher is, where in the world would we find any kind of records? My only thought was the only thing I could do in Muskegon was to go through the old microfilms and look for references, but that's, going back.
They exist.
Yeah.
In our parish, we had a family called Theory who had, and my brothers went to school with him, and Tom Occupenny and them went there too, but Mr. Theory was in Werner Van Braun's group before he came to the United States. And the reason he came to Grand Rapids was because of the Lear Sigler thing, I think, that I talked to you about, because, you know, I don't know exactly what he did with Van Braun, but he had some expertise.
Van Braun himself
Yeah,
had sketchy
got a lot of
background,
expertise.
but you overlook that.
Life history, I think, don't you, Frank?
Yeah.
Unger?
Well, Von Braun was a guy who was a young kid as a scientist, and he had some success with rockets, and the Nazis picked him up. The humorous thing I found is that, you know, in the middle of the development of the V2, the Gestapo noticed that he was just Googling around, making, you know, in his time, making little plans for a rocket to go to Mars or something. They arrested him and threw him in jail.
Jeez, I didn't know that.
Hitler had to take him out. I mean, that's just a side story, but that's how crazy the Gestapo was at that time. You know, they would, in a flash, just throw one of their main scientists in jail, you know, for just Googling stuff, you know.
Well, we don't have to talk about the anti-Semitism in the Catholic Church for the whole call. If you guys have anything else you want to talk about, Paul, how's your health? How's your recovery from your?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well.
Good. I'm starting to take tests about my heart. I've had 3 siblings, younger siblings, 3, who've had open heart surgery in the last 6 years. One of them has died. So there's a history of heart problems in my family. My father died of a heart attack at age 80. So I had an episode where my heart rate spiked. I was in a class to help me breathe better and exercise class, and I was wearing a heart monitor. And they came running over and saying, your heart is just dangerously high, your heart rate. You have to stop doing what you're doing and go home. So now I'm seeing a cardiologist in a couple of days, and I wore a heart monitor for 2 weeks. So you never know. We're not young whippersnappers anymore.
You know,
Haven't heard that
a lot of
name.
this stuff.
I know it's an old-fashioned word, but aren't we all 76, 77, 78?
Yeah.
Aren't
Something
we all
like
in
that.
Yep.
in that age bracket?
No, there are issues of diet.
Did you actually have a heart attack, Paul? Did you have a heart attack?
I did not.
You did not.
I did not. My cardiac history is odd in another direction. I don't think I ever fainted when I was at the seminary. If I did, and someone knows it, say so. But in 1990, I finally got around to doing a baseline physical, to have a baseline as I got older. And one of the things we did in the physical was a stress test. And as we got into the cool down phase of the stress test, I blacked out. Actually, I flatlined. My heart stopped beating for 30 seconds.
Jeez.
And it spooked some people. But I said, well, I've passed out like this. This is probably the 8th time. And I went enumerating, and I thought these were fainting spells, and they might have been fainting spells. But, by our kitchen sink one day, I fainted at church one day. There was another time when Sue and I were visiting her dad, he was recovering from some surgery and testing at one of the big hospitals in Detroit. He was up on the 6th floor, maybe, and taking the elevator down to go home, I fainted on the elevator, and they almost didn't let me out of the hospital, but they did. And having, so I said, this has probably happened, all these various times. And the cardiologist said, oh yeah, that's, flatlining is something that happens. And, and I'm not concerned about your flatlining. I'm concerned about what you might be doing when that happens and who you might drive the car into.
Yeah.
So we'll fix that. We'll put in a pacemaker. So I've worn a pacemaker since 1990, and the early pacemakers.
So that's 30 years. That's 30 years you've been wearing a pacemaker.
Yeah, I'm on my third now, and I've got another 2.5 years out of this, and if I'm still alive, I'll get another one. But that first pacemaker was not one of the first pacemakers. Pacemakers were in use for probably 2 or 3 decades before that. Pretty primitive, but they put them in your abdomen and hook them up into your circulatory system. But my pacemaker my first one was called a dual chamber pacemaker, and I think now just about all pacemakers are dual chamber, and so it had a lead in the the
Ventricle?
right ventricle and a lead in the right auricle. I may be on the wrong side of the heart here, but if the ventricle didn't start contracting when it should, it would spike and initiate a heart contraction, and the same thing would happen in the auricle at its sequence. And the cardiologist's diagnosis of my condition was that there's a synode between the two chambers where the nerves of the heart kind of come together, and there's brain waves that are working down there too, and that the issue was that the heart didn't pass on the signal for one chamber to take over for the other, and it would just stop sending a signal to beat altogether. And and after I was out for 10, 20, 30 seconds, brain will say, let's get this going again, and I would be back into operation. That pacemaker lasted me for 13 years, and the pacemaker that we replaced that with, well, it was a much smarter pacemaker. That besides just this stuff that making the heart beat, it was doing heart monitoring all along. That the first time that I that we interrogated that pacemaker after it went in. Found out I had atrial fib. Probably had atrial fib for a while, and we started treating atrial fib. That they're just all kinds of stuff, but had a computer. So I've got a computer I'm wearing here now, but a pacemaker doesn't detect issues with blockage of your arteries, those types of things that are a major cardiac issue. And my cardiac arteries were like 98% blocked with.
That's pretty serious.
It was pretty serious. They said, "Well, we're going to fix this right away." They waited about 12 hours, something like that.
How'd you get your heart? You don't have a replacement, do you? Do you have your own?
No. They stripped veins from my lower leg,
Right.
and used those
Bypass.
so they attached those into the aorta, into the side of the aorta, the outside as you look at it, and stitch it in, and then they merge that into the arteries that are feeding blood to the heart, so that it restores the circulation to the muscle that is blocked on what the main artery is. And those arteries aren't real big arteries. Your heart's about the size of your fist, so the arteries, they're not real big, but they move a lot of blood.
Is this at Borges Hospital?
Yeah.
Wow. You're lucky you have a facility like that, Paul. Close.
Yes, that's true. This country has, we have lots of cardiac facilities like that
Yeah, but Borges is a good hospital.
It is.
Really blessed in that, so.
But there are a lot of young and middle-aged cardiologists around that are doing this type of thing. And
Right.
Well, I'm seeing one on Friday, so I'll let you guys know in an email what they
Do
find.
they have one in Finnville, Frank?
No, I'm in Chicago,
Well,
I'm going to
they
Northwestern
better have one there.
Northwestern Medicine. I don't know if it's a huge.
Yeah, that's what's it? The LORIE, the guy that owns the Philadelphia Eagles. Laurie puts the money in that place. That's a really good hospital.
It's a chain of hospitals. They have at least I think 8 hospitals and another 10 testing sites or doctor office sites. I'm impressed with the 2 doctors I've been assigned to so far, and this will be the 3rd one from Northwestern. This cardiologist. Friday. I wore a heart monitor for 2 weeks. I don't know what happened during this exercise class. Apparently my heart spiked at a dangerous level. My heart rate.
Glad they caught it.
I was wearing a monitor, and they were testing my oxygen level in my blood the whole hour session, and this monitor detected a major spike in my heart rate, and they made me sit down, sent me home. I had to call my pulmonologist, my lung doctor, and she said, "Well, you need to see a cardiologist. We can't have you continue at this exercise class until we clarify what's happening with your heart." So, yeah. And then of course I have a knee that needs to be honestly replaced. It's really painful.
Is that from your NFL football days? Or?
No, it's my family has a history of most of my siblings have artificial knees. I already have one, but my second one is gone. There's no cartilage in the right knee.
Ooh.
I'm in a lot of pain when I'm walking. When I'm sitting, sleeping, I'm okay, but when I'm walking, it hurts a lot. So I need surgery on the right knee, but I can't get surgery until all my doctors sign off. You know, I mean, my dentist has to sign off.
Yep.
My lung doctor has to sign off. My family doctor has to sign off. And now that I have a cardiologist, which I haven't seen yet, he's got to sign off. So this knee surgery has probably will be postponed till late March, or maybe even April. But I can't do the things I want to do with this knee being so painful.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess we're all just all getting old, and
There's something to that.
our health.
There's something to that.
Yes.
And
But when
kind
I'm
of
sitting here, I'm not exerting myself. My breathing is not a problem right this moment. My knee doesn't hurt because I'm sitting. My heart's not moving at a fast pace. So who knows? I'll figure this out.
it's getting kind of scary when we're outliving our doctors.
Yes. One of my doctors is retiring. I've had him for 25 years. My family doctor is retiring in June. I said, "You can't retire." He says, "I'm 65. Of course I can retire."
Well, I was in the same boat. I had one for almost 30 years, and I told him, I says, you can't retire. You're not entitled to a life. I'm still here.
Well, I think I'm
too
on
well.
my fourth cardiologist now.
Pardon?
I think I'm on my fourth
Oh,
cardiologist.
you are.
now.
You actually move on when you change locations, or they retire, or they move on.
They retire. That when or they I've had a couple young guys who have moved on
Took a promotion or something. Yeah.
for whatever reason.
Yeah.
I mean the guy I have now is he's maybe 10 years younger than I am, so that puts him in his mid-60s.
Yeah.
He's getting ready to retire.
Yeah.
But when my previous cardiologist moved south for the second time, and he'd been taking care of me for 6 or 8 years. I was talking to someone in the office that had, I think she was a nurse, but she had a handle or a hand in some of the reorganizations they were doing. I said, well, find a young guy for me, someone that will outlive me. So that, but if I make another 3 or 4 years, I probably will have someone besides Dr. Tan.
Can I take the liberty here? I think we're getting close to closing, but I was going to make a suggestion if you feel comfortable with this. I recently came across a book. I don't know if you can see it here. It's called The Wandering Mind. Can you see it? Well, it looks backwards to me.
Yeah,
Oh, I can see it.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just come out. It's by a woman who is from the University of Georgia. And in the little subtitle up here, it says, "What Medieval Monks Tell Us About Distraction." And it goes through stuff that I thought might be interesting. I was going to send the New York Times and there's another one. I was going to send it to Bill if he could send it out. You're interested to discuss it. It talks about the life of the monks, how they evolved. And I thought, well, we never talked about that. The monks were just but the routine that we went through for 5 or 6 years or so is all based on this stuff. And it's trying to compare, like it's kind of telling how these people evolved and everything. I'm talking about both monks and nuns, basically, but a lot of times they come together. And it's in the area of, are you familiar with in Egypt and Syria in the Levant? If you're familiar with that, the Levant area is the area like from Egypt and Libya and along Morocco and that area of the Mediterranean. And I just thought it's a lot to do with how you keep concentration and prayer. I'm not trying to convert anybody or, like it's never talked about in the seminary at all. But I remember one thing that Father Zaskowski used to talk about when he taught us religion. He always made a big deal about the Acts of the Apostles and saying that you learned a lot about the early parts of the church and how it evolved and, got established. But this is the monks really had a lot to do with the establishment of the church, and what you learned has a lot to do with learning. And let me tell you, they have a chapter which I'm going through now that I never thought about, and that is that they were involved, and we know this well, about books, right? They're just there concentrating. Well, one of the things that to think about is that in 826, that was when Charlemagne took over the reign of the Holy Roman Empire. He appointed Elcoim, who was a monk, he was an English monk, to basically establish the Catholic schools, or the school system, which were out of the cathedrals. That's how they kind of emerged. But the reason he did that, I'm talking about the reason Charlemagne did that, is because he wanted people to be able to count and to read so that he would be able to get the right taxes from everybody. That was his motive. But something that was interesting to me, which I didn't know, even though Charlemagne pushed this, he could not read. But the evolution of this. But the point of this is the behavior of the monks and how they kind of establish their routines. And you're talking about like 300. Trying to think. 300 AD to, because they have different names now, but 300 AD to 800. So it precedes when it really gets into the groove, if you will, into the medieval times. And how these people kind of form their communities and, what they thought and things like that, how they got organized. So if you're interested, I could send, these two things from Bill and maybe use it as something for next time. It's just a thought. So
we need some topics actually. I don't you think?
I appreciate what you've done, Frank.
No, I didn't want to dominate this whole conversation. We could go anywhere, but I'd like to have a little background on some of these calls. We can talk about our health. I'm going to a retirement party on Wednesday, retirement party. My federal retayees, we try to meet once a month. I'll have to walk with a cane very slowly. But lately we've been talking about our health, and so we made a semi-pact that we can spend the first 5 minutes on our health, and the rest is on vacations, children, grandchildren, what's happening in our lives. We spend too much time talking about our operations and our, and that's true. As we get old.
Well, I was thinking when you were talking about your uncle and in my time in the service and what that was like, especially since I had a kind of a cross typing in the Army, in the sense that I got in as an enlisted man. I trained for about 10 months to become an officer, decided not to, and then was back as an enlisted man.
Was this after you left the seminary?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I wasn't
I
before.
didn't get drafted out of the set, but I mean, the whole parallel. But the transition I went through in about a 3-year period is to go from a seminary to one of the most radical anti-war campuses and environments in the United States to the U.S. Army, and kind of adjusting to life, all that type of life, and my experiences, especially coming from the seminary and seeing kind of life as it is, if you will. It was interesting, but I just thought that this book was something that we've kind of experienced. And one of the things that I can share with you, and actually it involves all of you except Al, and is that I wrote a paper at Michigan in sociology about your class. And in my it was positive, don't get me wrong. It was just comparing things about what went on there. And I don't know, for what it's worth.
Did you pick on our class because we had so many, or because there were so few?
Well, that was part of it, but it was, I just thought I'm not trying to, rub your shoulders or anything, but I was impressed of how you stayed together, and how it, I don't know what the right word is, how it matured and lived through the 6 years, or, the times we were with you. Because I don't know, I can't speak for Frank, but I felt like an orphan in the class I was in. Because like no one paid attention to us. And the class kind of had an identity. And I mean, I told Frank that we had this picture in that recorder, and it says the 3 who dared. They didn't even say who our names were.
I don't know how daring we were either.
I mean, the lecturer wrote this. I got the headline. I said, wow, that makes me feel good. Just go out there, guys. But anyways, it was just my impressions, and trying to put it in a sociological perspective, and the reaction of the people that read my paper, and it was kind of interesting.
What was their reaction to that paper, Dick?
Well, it was interesting because it was something that I had to learn at Michigan, and learning because I was real confident. I was really excited to go. Don't get me wrong or anything. And the seminary teaches you to be very kind of rote, and not very, I guess in a way, not very inquisitive. It teaches you how to be a really good writer, I'll tell you that, outstanding. But Michigan, in an institution like that, and those, I'll use those big power universities, are really into proof and the examples of science and things like that, which the Catholic Church really doesn't encourage that, and the scientific stuff. And Michigan's, at that time, its whole liberal arts area was really pushed by the psychology department. It may still be. But the one thing that was interesting is, for me, is I never got an A in an English class in the seminary in 6 years I was there. And I'd beat my head against the wall trying to figure out why. And I'd go to Michigan, write a paper, and I get an A. And I was just wondering what was going on. But it's just all those experiences and in life and living through it that, knock on wood, beyond people's health. And I wish all of you well. And thought it would be, what I learned, and it was valuable to learn those lessons of what the universities were really trying to do and teach. And maybe some of you have, the same, had those same types of experiences. I don't know.
Well, I did.
I have. Yeah.
after I was out of the service, I went to Grand Valley. After a few years of messing around, I says, you got to get your graduate degree. And I wrote a paper, and, that you belong to these different accounting organizations, and you hand the paper in, and they forward it, and your group gets a little brownie points, if you will. And it turned out that was chosen to be published in Management Accounting Magazine. It was about indexing the progressive tax system, And at that time, the income taxes weren't adjusted for inflation. But the gist of it is that a person on my salary, I didn't tell them what it was or anything. By 1990, I would have been in a 50% tax bracket. Because your income goes up, but the table doesn't go up either. But boy, I got kudos from everybody, and I didn't think that was a particularly brilliant piece of writing or anything. But others also mentioned that, in our conversations, that we did learn how to write and present ideas.
We definitely do. Definitely did here. After I left, I had a real good career as a copywriter. I was writing for my living here. It was a great career, and I'm all set, and I owe that to St. Joe's.
One thing we did get from that place is we were taught well.
Yes.
Mike, do you want to write a book?
I was too busy doing other things, advertising, things like that, to write a book. Maybe I will now that I'm retired, but...
Well, I wrote a book in the sense I wrote a dissertation. It was like 260 some pages. And it took me about a year to do that. And I was fortunate to have enough, I could sustain myself and kind of coop myself away a little bit. But I learned, it was interesting. I learned a heck of a lot. I didn't go into it thinking I would. But it really, it taught me a great deal.
Yes.
Mike, with your career in copywriting, it reminded me back when Monsignor Martin I think he was teaching us speech writing or speaking, or could have been English. But the assignment for us was to write some advertising copy. And somebody, it could have been me because it's stuck in my brain forever, was somebody said, well, like I said, it might be me. The gist of it was, we're offering this at premium prices. And
you got to give them an incentive.
Right. And it was Monsignor Martin that said, well, I don't think premium prices means high prices, not premium quality at bargain prices is what you meant, not premium prices. But that has stuck in my mind for 50, 60 years now.
Yeah, you just don't say it that way.
Right.
Get your money, but you don't say it that way.
Right. And by the way,
Bill Yagerlener, recently maybe in the last year or so, you published something from might have been in the Recorder, or you found something where we all wrote a paper. Most of us.
Oh, yeah.
And I have to admit, it was the worst effort I had ever done in my life, in my mind. Rereading what I wrote back, I don't know what grade that was. Was that our third year in high school, maybe, or fourth year in high school? We had to write this. The topics were given to us, I believe. I don't think we chose our own.
No, I think we did choose our own. I can't remember the name of it. I think it was Stosh that sent that on to me to republish. Yeah.
Yeah, I was not pleased with what I wrote. I was showing my age, obviously. I was showing that I was only 16, 17, and I had no knowledge about the topic, not much really anyway. It has something to do with race, I think. And I didn't do a very good job in my mind.
Before we leave that Dick and Frank Unger, now, at what point, I mean, you ended up with 3 in your class.
Right.
So at the time that we were, let's say, that would have made seniors in high school, you would have been ahead of us. And what did you, how many of them were there? 5 at that point?
5 in the first year of college.
Okay, who were they?
Or the other
So
two.
Tony,
The other two.
One was Anthony, I think, I can't remember.
The other was Greg Lyon.
no, he left in the
Yeah.
third year. He left, Paul, he left in the 3rd year. I'm speaking as if we were freshmen in college.
Yeah,
Um,
I've got the wrong name.
was Tony Weber one of them, Frank, or not? There were 9. And as
there was Anthony, I remember his name, and I just can't remember the other side of the name. And I can't remember the other one.
where was he from, Frank?
I don't know.
Well, I know the last year we were there were only 3 of us.
Yes.
Mhm.
When you think about that, I've thought about that, and it's like we were in an English school, like you'd have your own mentor, and you just go every week or something, see your mentor. But a lot of the times we were, what do you call it? We were integrated with you in the classes. So that like if they did Greek, that like one year they did the New Testament, and then the next year they would do, I don't know, Plato or something like that.
Yeah.
So that they were able to, get a little bit more, they'd have more people. Now, I think the philosophy class was only taught to us. There weren't that many classes, there were maybe 2 that were taught that. I can't think of the other 2 that were there, Frank.
Well,
There was time.
as far as the joint classes go, physics was one of them.
Right. I always thought it was interesting that it was taught by Joseph G. Wiz.
Yeah, middle name G.
That was a true name. He's a nice guy.
Well, that guy killed me. We didn't have a math background, so we didn't really understand a lot of what was going on.
Right.
And he was teaching this thing, and he sat up at the board, and he wrote all this down and all the things and everything, and I could understand it. He was going through it, but when the class was over, I couldn't do it. And he amazed me. Once he went through the whole board like that, and then he stepped back for a second, and he said, gee, I've never solved that problem that way before.
And then someone raised their hand and told them that they made the alpha the wrong way or something, right?
No, but I mean,
What got me thinking about that was that the 3 Who Dared article. And it meant, I thought that the Saginaw Diocese was set up a couple of years later than it actually was. I think it was set up or opened the doors in 1961, and that's when the big.
Yeah.
And so, but the thing is, I don't remember people in your class. I remember Larry Christensen because of his playing the trumpet.
That's right.
But I mean, the rest of you guys just sort of didn't stand out. I mean, we were pretty much concentrated on what was going on in our own class and never really paid attention to who was.
well, I mean, there were just so few of us, and we we didn't do a lot of participating in a lot of things and stuff like that. So we just kind of,
I mean, like, I was always in the infirmary. Not that I regretted that, but I mean, I was helping Sister Christopher, and I liked doing that. So that meant that you never saw me hardly. You know, I'm talking about like, you know, in the back there where you could smoke and all that. The smoking path, I guess it's called. But
Yeah.
so I didn't smoke, and so you wouldn't see me, right? And then let's see what Frank. I don't know what did you have a special assignment? They had someone that was a sacristan. You're right, Paul.
oh yeah, I had that for a
Ryan
year. Yeah.
was there. And then the only other thing was, I mean, some stuff we did together was like with the choir, and I wasn't in the choir. Were you, Frank?
I was in the choir. Yeah.
Okay.
Paul, you were one of the sacristans, weren't you?
Right.
Yes.
But I think I think after the third year, Greg Lyon left.
I've got to think here a minute. No, he left after the first year of college.
Yeah.
And then Frank
Took
came
over.
in as sacristan without
Yeah.
any prior training.
Oddly enough, oddly enough, at St. Mary's in Baltimore, the first year I was there, I was the sacristan, you know, at the Mother Seton House there in the downstairs, you know, where she would go to church every day. So
Cool.
just
Yeah.
curious point.
Well, I
Yeah.
saw Greg Lyon last time I saw him. He was in Shasta, California, or Mount Shasta, outside of Sacramento. He had married and he was working for a newspaper, I believe. Either that or a TV. I wasn't sure if it was TV or something like that. That's the last time I ever saw him.
Hey, Al, what was your sort of official role? You know, I was master of ceremonies. I remember that.
As far as I know, I didn't have any official role. I wasn't in the choir because I couldn't read music, even
Me
though I
too.
loved to sing. And no special things. I did help out in the library for Father Rose. You know.
I did that for 1 year too. Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably the biggest thing I did.
And Frank Marfia, what was yours again?
You know, I wasn't a sacristan. The last year, our third year in the high school was our last year at the big building, the
Right.
major
Mhm.
seminary. I for half of the year that year I was in charge of the bulletin board. I don't know if you guys remember that, but there was a bulletin board.
Yeah, you post the newspaper in the gym?
Right outside the study hall. There was this big
Right.
bulletin
Oh,
board.
that one?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And I had a team. I had to, you know, a couple of younger people working with me, and our task was 4 times a year we had to replace whatever the display was, and we had all kinds of tricks and paper. It was an area where we could cut and paste and enlarge letters or reduce them. You know, there was machines to. It was an interesting job, and I don't know if it had a title. I don't know if anybody else had that. Had any of you guys ever worked on that bulletin board? Probably not.
No.
Who was your boss?
What was it? What
Who
is
was
the
your boss,
sacristan do?
Frank?
What?
Frank, who was your boss?
Don't
Who
remember.
told you what to do?
One of the priests, and I honestly don't remember.
Yeah.
It might have been Father Rose.
Yeah, media specialist. There you go.
It was an interesting job because I mean there was some expectation that we do that made the bulletin board look very professional. We were in charge of whatever was put on the board, but there was a
It
display.
did look good.
There was a major display 4 times a year that lasted a month or two.
And we
I
know
remember it did look good.
we know Bill Gebhard was
Was he in charge of the outdoor equipment?
Maintenance.
Maintenance.
That's right.
Talk about the fox guarding the hen house.
I told them they shouldn't give me all those keys. I told them.
It seems like Tom Cabildus also, did the two of you share that role, or?
Well, they in third year, that's when they split it. They gave us all these assignments, and Tom wasn't a member. We had like three of us that were put on to maintenance, and then as we moved forward, one of them left, and Tom was put into that because Tom just kept hanging around the workshop with the janitors and that, and so they Father Zaskowski was our boss. And,
Was there no janitor, a lay person who was a janitor for the?
Yeah, there was, and he was down in that wood, or the shop that was down on the ground floor there, and a lot of good tools in there.
Right. And
What does the sacristan have to do? Honestly, I don't remember. What was the sacristan responsible for?
Getting all the wax out of the candles and stuff.
That was part of it.
I did that. So, I mean, you had to make sure that the floors were clean and everything, but the care of the vestments,
Okay.
and especially during Sunday Mass and during the Mass, you laid those vestments out in a special way
Right.
so that they and you laid them out in a way that it was there. They would just put on the one layer after the other. You would do that. You were responsible for cleaning the chalices and that. So it's just basic upkeep. Another thing I did when I was in the seminary, I was head of the drama committee.
Well, I didn't know that.
And we dealt with lighting and makeup and some artistry, for the backdrops and even some sound effects, that kind of thing. And that was kind of fun. I actually directed a play once. I did everything there except actually have a part in a play. I just never
What was
did.
the play?
Hmm?
What was the play?
Which play?
What's
I don't know.
It was a serious one day in the day of Ivan Denisovich.
I remember that.
oh yeah,
And Paul was in it.
Yeah. I remember that.
I don't know who was in there. I mean, it was, I don't know,
Rattle.
a player or anything.
was
But,
the lead.
Joe Radlett.
Pardon?
Yep. Joe Radlett was the lead in that. You're right,
Yeah.
Mike.
yeah.
I do remember doing some sound effects too, and playing music during intermission and stuff off my tape recorder that most of you know I had back there.
We had to make some rain once, and so what we ended up doing was dropping nails in a bucket at a steady pace and made a loop out of the tape so that it could just, continuously flow. Yeah, some of that was kind of fun, took a little imagination.
Where was Alexa when you needed her?
Yeah.
and Mike Murphy, what was it that you were officially responsible for? I can't remember. Did you just mention it?
I didn't really have an office per se, I just kind of worked around here and there. No, I didn't get a ministry or anything like that.
I remember when we had music that we played that you brought a lot of operas to us. Wagner operas.
But everybody
not
brought
official.
music into the room. Yeah.
Yeah. But I remember that.
Paul, you had a position, didn't you?
Well, I was a sacristan. So the
right,
sacristan, each year, the duties each year had a set of duties. And so you kind of trained up and so it started as a junior, and that was a lot of basic cleaning.
Right.
The seems like we dusted the floor thoroughly every day.
Mhm.
And then at the senior point, well, the senior and then the second year person, set up the vestments and that type of stuff the night before for the priests for their personal masses, so to speak.
Well, didn't they have masses on the side altars or something too?
That's
Yeah, Paul,
correct.
Did you set up who was going to serve those masses? I know there was a schedule developed.
No, there was someone else.
That was me.
Yeah,
Oh,
as
Master of
master of
ceremonies.
ceremonies.
Master of ceremonies had to make sure that
Everything got assigned. Every mass was assigned.
right, that
Okay.
you had to be waiting in case one of the priests didn't show up. Well, you just didn't have to suit up for that particular day.
Who would have been in charge of the kitchen work that we had to do? Was that the nuns itself who decided?
Yeah, the only thing that they had was there was a system for. Oh, wait a minute! You're right. We had the dishwasher.
We had people
Yeah.
who had to
What-
clean up.
You were assigned to a crew.
They were teams, if you remember, there were certain
Yeah.
teams, and they would,
Yeah.
yeah.
They would have
If
it
it was
for
your-
like a week or something like that.
Yeah,
or
there was
month
a
or
set
something.
amount of time that you were the cleanup crew, and then you also had to set the table for the next meal, I think, too. didn't you?
Right. Well, it was
We
we'd
could
end
serve
up
the
like
food too.
Oh,
we'd have like eight or 10 guys on a crew,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
we kind of divided up which ones were going to do the clear
clearing-
washing and clearing, and then setting up the tables. Because I mean, we used the same set of plates. They came in dirty and they went back out on the tables
Right.
in a
Some of them
20-minute
were even
period.
clean, Bill.
But they had you also
Cleanliness
served
was
the
next
food.
to impossible.
Served the food. I mean, you brought out the like the warm meal or
Those
warm
big
thing.
warmers.
And then everybody ran for the Sunday bread. So
But each table got at least one loaf of bread, didn't it? Didn't each table get a?
well they I don't know how many they cooked, but the prefect sat up there the whole meal cutting the bread.
Well, we each got a loaf of bread on the table, but once it was gone, the prefect could go up and get it was. So I mean, it was devoured
Yeah, but they
instantly.
say the
When it was,
prayer and they
when it
all
was
run
fresh.
bread with us.
It was fresh bread, and it
When it
was
was fresh
glazed.
bread, it was
Yeah.
even,
Oh, yeah.
Glazed. It was
Well, they put that
fantastic.
icing on it too.
But even the fresh wheat bread, when it was,
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it was still warm,
and
and
you
Yeah.
put
it
some
was.
butter
Oh
on
my
it.
gosh!
Good.
Oh, it
It
was
was good.
great.
No, we ate well, we did.
Well,
Can you guys see me? There.
Yeah.
That
Yeah, a lot
was
of
jiggling all over the place.
Yeah,
That's-
we had a lot of interference, Bill.
That's
I
my
see you fine.
Comcast. Comcast sucks.
so does Spectrum.
Right. Let's take a brief time out here. Our next get together would be in April, and April 3rd is in Holy Week. Palm Sunday is April 2nd. So I guess is that what you want to do? Is there any reason not to do it?
How about the week after?
That would be
April 10th?
Yeah,
April 10th would
Easter
be
Monday.
Monday of Easter week. So
Yeah, it's after
Day
Easter.
after Easter.
right.
Yes.
Well, that might be a better day, maybe.
yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know if people are trying. Do you want me to send you that info on that book? I mean,
Oh yeah. I'd be more than happy to.
yeah, I mean, you
And-
might
and-
want to say again.
Mention the chapters that are more relevant, because we probably won't be able to get copies of the book. But we
Right.
can go online.
Well, I'll
When you send it to
not
Bill.
that many chapters, but I'll just read them real quick. We got to find it now. Darn.
No, I mean, when you send it to Bill Yagerlener, mention the ones that are more relevant.
Oh,
Than,
they have, yeah, okay, I see. But they have the world, community, body, books, memory, and mind.
okay, so it's kind of generic. Yeah.
Yeah, they are, but I mean, they cover kind of the whole environment, both large and small, of someone that was a monk at that time.
At that time, in 600 AD.
Yeah,
Okay.
right around there. They don't say AD anymore, but I can't remember what it is.
They
Year-
don't.
It's CE now, isn't it?
Something.
Current era, something like that.
Current era, that's right.
Yeah.
current era. So,
Yeah,
I
people
don't know why they chose
People
to
don't
do
know
that.
that. They don't know
They did.
Anno Domini.
Ain't the same thing.
Yeah. Listen, I've got to go too. It's a good session, Bill. But we need. I like the idea of having a topic that we could spend 45 minutes to an hour on versus just shooting the breeze.
I had a nice time tonight. So,
I did
and
too.
I'm glad
Yeah.
Paul is doing well. Paul,
Once I got in,
not patronizing you, but I don't know what you've done in therapy, but that's the most animated you've been in the times I've seen you. So I think that there's something going on with you that are making you.
Well, I think much of it was the deterioration that I was going through coming into it. It was pretty subtle, and that I'm much perkier than.
It's
I have been.
really evident, and I'm glad that you can enjoy that because it's really you. We can, your intellect we need.
It's the old Paul.
And that next call, we need to pick a date for another gathering.
Yeah, Frank, that's a good idea. I think that the weather should be. Let's hope the weather's better.
No, I mean on the April call.
I hear you. No, but I'm saying that let's hope the weather gets better too.
Of course.
But you were talking about a physical get together.
A physical get together and maybe
Right, yeah,
Grand Rapids this time. Is
Yeah,
that too far for you, Bill?
Yeah. I'll be, right now I'm in Florida, so.
I know, but
I'll be back.
in Michigan?
I'll be back by the 1st of May.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
I can go back and see when it was. For some reason, I want to say toward the end of May is when we got together over on.
In Kalamazoo.
yeah, at the Black Rock, yeah.
We got
When
St.
did-
Joe. St. Joe we got together. Well, that was in the fall, wasn't it?
Yeah, the fall, I think.
Yeah, the previous fall.
But the Black Rock, I think, either the end of May or 1st of June.
Okay. Well, we don't have to go back to Kalamazoo. I mean, we were being nice to the residents of Kalamazoo. For me, Grand Rapids, I've got cousins all over Grand Rapids, and also maybe by then, if my knee is better, I could stay with Albert again.
I just thought you wanted us to go to Fenville. I don't know.
No, Fenville has nothing to.
A lot of pickles.
Yeah, they got
Yeah.
vineyards, they make wine.
Yep.
One of the things I want to do is to go over to the archives and take a look at my own personal records there. I got I forget who it was that said that was the limit that the archivist said, I'll show you your records, but you can't see anybody else's. And that apparently would include, remember our discussion about the psychological tests, all of the stuff that was in our personal records.
Oh,
I want to see that.
Don't you have truth or that right of freedom of information or something? It's your own. No, if it's your own record.
Aren't they only open probably Monday through Friday though, Bill? That's
Probably.
It's probably one day, like in Wednesday at like 9 in the morning or 7 in the morning or something like that.
You get 15 minutes, right?
All right.
Yeah.
I want to see what they actually showed, or if there. I have one copy of the grades, and I can't even think of what year it was. It was. I remember at the bottom of it, you had to have your parents sign off that they had seen that, and for some reason, I got that, but my parents didn't sign the the last of the down at the bottom, so we never sent it back in. So I still have that, but that's the only record that I have of my time there.
Time there?
Yeah.
I think I had several of mine, but I didn't keep them.
Okay, guys, I'm gonna go.
All right.
Great talking to you
Take care
again.
to all.
Bye.
Take care, guys.
Take care.
Yeah.
All righty.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Sign off. Bye.
Bye.